Hi, everyone, and welcome to this month's session of the JSTOR Digital Stewardship Services training webinars. We have 3 rotating topics for training webinars throughout 2026, and today we will be talking about the more advanced features related to digital asset management functionality and stewardship. This topic is relevant for Tier 2 participants as well as Tier 3 stewardship participants who are using stewardship's DAM functionality. Our other monthly sessions cover project administration and cataloging. And if you haven't had the chance to attend any of those yet, we are putting a link in the chat to our training site where you can see the schedule and register, as well as view recordings of past sessions. My name is Elizabeth Behrens, and I am an Education Services Lead at Ithaca. I am joined today by my colleague, Remus Jackson, also an Education Services Lead, who will be helping answer questions after today's training. This webinar will be recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel, and the link to the recording will be sent to all registrants by email. After you exit the webinar today, you will be taken, as always, to a brief survey, and we'd appreciate hearing your thoughts about whether this was helpful for you. We are here to support you as you use stewardship, and we always want to know what works for you and what more you need from us in terms of training and education resources. If you don't have time to take the survey immediately, it will also be sent to you by email in about an hour, and we always read every comment and appreciate your feedback and suggestions. Okay, so here is today's agenda. The features we will be looking at today are mostly around the relationships you can build between your records and assets by using compound objects, containers, and compilations. After that, we will also take a look at building a collection from an existing spreadsheet using the Collection Builder tool in Stewardship. Please note there's a questions box in your go-to panel where you can enter questions at any time, and we should have some time for questions at the end of the training. Remus is going to share a link now in the chat to a handout which contains helpful resources on the stewardship support site. And we will update this handout after the webinar with a link to the recording and summaries of the questions and answers from the Q&A part of the webinar today. I'm going to turn my camera off now so you can see the details on my screen a little better, but we will both be back for the Q&A later. One other note about GoTo, if you look at your GoTo panel, if you prefer to have live closed captioning, that is a feature in GoTo. If you look for the CC closed captioning button, you can turn that on if you'd like to see that during the webinar. Okay, we are going to actually start with a poll. Let me just open it up to ask you how familiar you are already with stewardship's relational tools, compound objects, containers, and compilations. And I'll just give you a minute to vote, and then we'll take a look at the results. Just a few more seconds. Not everyone has voted, but pretty close. Okay, I will share the results. Okay, it looks like not a lot of you have used them yet, so I'm glad you're here today. There is some familiarity with them, which is great, and a couple of people are completely new to these features. So that's wonderful. I hope you got a lot out of this session today. All right, let's move on to our next slide. All right, so today we're going to start first with compound objects. So a compound object is a single record that contains multiple image files. Compound objects may be useful for items like images of multi-page manuscripts, newsletters, postcards where you would like to include both the front and back of the postcard within the same record, or other objects where it would make sense to have a single record that has multiple media assets. The example here on my screen is from a collection from the University of Denver's Vicki Myron Gallery. This collection contains many great examples of compound objects of gallery installations, along with detailed images of works in the galleries. If you'd like to see these examples, we have, I forgot to mention earlier, within the handout, there are links to all of the examples that I'm going to be showing today. So you can take a look later at them if you like. One limitation to keep in mind with compound objects is you cannot mix media types and you can only use image files. So for example, you can't use a PDF or have a PDF and an image file in the same record. You can only have multiple image files in one compound object record. On JSTOR, the item record looks like any other single item record with one set of metadata, but you can advance through the associated images within that record. So I'm going to show you this on JSTOR. Sorry, it opened on the wrong side on my side. Okay, so here is the same record on JSTOR. I'll scroll down a little bit so you can see. There are 54 media files in this single record, and that includes details of works in the installation, in addition to the gallery installation photographs. So I can see them all by scrolling down here to see the thumbnail versions on the left, and I can click on them to open them up within the image viewer. If I go further down, I can see those gallery installation photos. Or I can just advance between the images by using the arrows in the image viewer window. And as I said, this collection has a lot of great examples like this if you'd like to take a closer look. All right, so next we're going to go into stewardship to learn how to create a compound object. So let me open up stewardship on my end here. Okay. All right, so here I am in stewardship, and I'm going to open up this example project that I have to use today. And I wanted to mention there are a couple of ways to create a compound object in stewardship. If you have an existing record that contains an image file and you'd like to just add additional image files to that record, you can just upload additional files that way. So for example, I have this record in my project here. It's a wooden carving of a fish. And I have some more photos of this carving from different angles, and I'd like to add them to this same record. So to add the additional image files, I just go to the Edit Media dropdown and choose Add Media. Then I'll just browse for my files. I have them locally saved on my computer here. And I can select them all, just hold down Shift, and then there they are here in stewardship, ready to be uploaded. So I'll just click Upload. Okay, so now this record has multiple images associated with it. There is a Related Objects tab that will appear above the metadata fields, and sometimes you have to click Refresh to see it. Sometimes it just pops up on its own. I'll refresh. Right there. So there it says 6 related objects. If I click on that tab, I can see all of the images that are now associated with this one record. And I can even drag and drop them if I'd like to show these in a different order. If I want to delete any, I can just select that record and click delete. I'm sorry, that image, and click delete. And I can even add additional files from here if I'd like to add some more to this one record. I can also go back to the item record by choosing one of my cataloging form tabs at the top. And I can advance through all of the images this way by clicking the arrows right here in the image viewer. It looks very similar to JSTOR. If I open up this toggle thumbnails button at the top of the image viewer, I can see all of them in this view as well. Okay, so I can proceed to catalog as usual and then save and publish my record when I'm ready. So I'll just go ahead and click Publish here. All right, so that is adding files, adding images to an existing record to create a compound object. Another way to create a compound object is at the point of uploading media files, rather than adding images to existing records. So you do that by uploading a number of image files together that have related file names, and then you select Group Compound Objects. So let me show you how to do that. I have a few more photos of a museum brochure that I'd like to add to my project. So I'm going to go to the Add menu at the top in Stewardship and choose Upload Media. And then I'll just browse for my files. They're in that same folder that the fish photos were in. right here. So these 4 photos I'm going to select and then click open to add them to stewardship. And then you'll note here, whenever you upload to stewardship, there is an option here that says group by file name. And that you can read more here too about compound objects. That is referring to if the items that you were uploading have a common root followed by sequential numbers, like these do here. I can choose group by file name, and then I can see how they will be grouped together. If for some reason it's grouping together things that don't go together, I can always click ungroup and take that away. Okay, so now I can go ahead and click upload because I do want these to be grouped together in one compound object. And then once they're on stewardship, I can see them together in the same ways, either in the related objects tab, I can see every page of this brochure, or I can see them larger in the image viewer window and proceed to catalog and publish as needed. Okay. And I'm just publishing these now if you want to take a look at them later. It gets, publishing sometimes takes a few minutes. So I'm just getting everything published if we want to refer to these later in the Q&A. Okay, so that is how to create a compound object. If you have any questions, feel free to enter your questions in the questions box and we can get to them at the end when we do the Q&A. But right now we have another quick poll for you about how you are currently handling multi-image items. So I'll just leave that up for about 30 seconds if you'd like to tell me if you're already using compound objects or what you're already doing. Okay, I will close the poll and we'll see the results. Okay, it looks like a number of you already are using compound objects, some separate records, and some are not doing this or not working with this type of content. All right, great. Thanks for participating in that. Okay. Next, we're going to look at containers. So let's go back to the slides and talk a little bit about containers. Okay. A container is a grouping of published items on JSTOR that are considered related parts of a whole. So you might want to create a container for content like periodicals, so your users can see all issues of one periodical title grouped together. Each container has a container page with container level metadata. As shown here in this screenshot from JSTOR, this is from a periodical called American Prisoner, which is in Reveal Digital's American Prison Newspapers collection. The container page is similar to a collection page, but it is only information about the items within the container. The container page displays the container name, any fielded information you choose about the container, a cover image, and your institutional branding. And as you can see here, you can search specifically within the container from this page. So I'm going to open this up on JSTOR to show you. So here is this same container on JSTOR. You can see the fielded metadata as well as the institutional branding from Reveal Digital in this case. And below the metadata is that search box for searching the contents of the container. And below that are the items in the container, which are the issues of this periodical. So let's go back into stewardship now to build a container. Okay, so as I just said, a container is a group of published items that are considered part of a set, like issues of a periodical or other serialized content, perhaps. So for this example today, I have a number of yearbooks in my collection that I'm going to group together in a container, and they're up here at the top of my project in stewardship. You can see I have a few different yearbooks cataloged. To create a container, you start by creating a container list. The list is not the container itself, but it's a list of containers that you'll have access to when cataloging. I might have yearbooks from several different schools in my collection. So my container list is going to be called yearbooks. And then the names of the yearbooks or the schools they are from will be the terms on my list. So let's start by creating the container list. We'll go to the cataloging tools menu in the sidebar and choose manage lists. And then we'll go to the actions menu at the top and choose new. And I'm going to create a new container. So I'll select container and then click next. And I'll name this container yearbooks. Okay. Next, we'll be setting up what metadata about the container displays on the container page. So like we just saw on JSTOR, that container page was this page with the fielded information. So now we're going to choose which fields will display on the container page. I can add, I'm sorry, by default, a title field is created, but I can add any additional fields to display on the container page by selecting the Add Field button. And you can choose what fields might be relevant to your content, like language, publisher, and so on. I'm just going to add a couple of fields for now for this demonstration. So the first field I'll add is a list field, and I'll call this language. And I chose a list field type because we have a built-in list in stewardship called shared shelf language. This is the shared resource for languages across stewardship participants, and I'll use that in my container. And then I'll add a couple more fields. I'll have grade level and maybe one called school. And that's good to start. I can always go back later and add more fields if I need to. Okay, so next I'll add terms to the container list. The terms will be the names of any containers that I create. So in other words, this yearbooks list consists of the titles of the yearbook series in my library's collection, and each one of these titles will be a separate container. So I'm going to click the Terms tab at the top here and then Add to enter the term. So in my case, I know I have several yearbooks that are titled The Loop. And then I can continue to catalog the container terms with the fields that I've created. So I can enter some more information here, like this is English, and the grade level of this school is K through 12, and whatever other information here I'd like to add. I can always go back and add more information to this container, and then I'll save this one. Okay, so that I created the container for the one yearbook series now called The Loop. If I have more that I'm ready to catalog, I can add additional terms to my container. I know I have one in my collection called Edgewood Middle School. And I can add what information I have about that. Okay, and that's good for now. All right, so after you save your terms, you can upload an image for the container. So this is the image that will display just like here on the container page. You can choose to add an image now, or if you don't add an image here, the first record that you link to this container will be used as the container image. So to add an image, you just open up one of your container terms and go to the media window over here on the right, and then choose a file. So I'll just add one of these. Okay, and for my other container, I'll allow the first record to be used as the container image. I just wanted to show you how to do this. Okay. I think that got stuck for some reason. I can try that again quickly. That might be my internet connection. All right, after that is done, there we go. The next thing we're going to do is add the container list to my stewardship project so I can populate the container. So in other words, I can't catalog any of this content and put any of my images or records into a container if it's not in my project. So I'm going to my project back in stewardship. So I'm going to projects, and I'll open up that example project. And I'm going to go to the project settings area. So if I go to fields, I can add a field. So I'm adding a new field to hold my container, and this will be a new field in my project. The field type will be a list field. And for the list selection, I'm going to choose the container that I've just created, which I called yearbooks. There it is. Okay. For the field label, you can call it the same thing as the container name. So I'm going to go ahead and just call this yearbooks. And then when I access that field in my project, I can choose the appropriate term, which are the names of the yearbooks. And then make sure when you're at this point, you scroll down to the bottom of the screen and add this new field to your cataloging form so you can see it when you're cataloging, and then click create. Okay, so now the field has been added to your project, and the next thing that you have to do is map the container field to the JSTOR field. So to do that, you'll be ensuring the container will be published to JSTOR. So go back in this project settings area where we already are, go to the targets tab, and then select your publishing target and choose map project fields. Scroll down to the container field, which is likely at the very bottom of your list of fields. And there it is. Yearbooks is unmapped. So to map it, I click that link icon and I'm going to choose the JSTOR field container. And this will ensure that it will be published to a container when it's published to JSTOR. Then I'll click update. Okay, so now to add any items in my project to the container, I just have to catalog my records and make sure I save, and catalog my records and select the relevant container in the container list field. So I'm going to open up my yearbook issues in my project, choose the container, and save and publish the record. So I'll just choose a few at a time here. So these are from Edgewood, and I'll just skip ahead to the container field. Down here, the yearbooks field. I'm going to click add terms, and there's Edgewood Middle School. So I'll just add it to this record and then save the records and then publish. Okay, and I'll do the same with the other yearbooks I have. A few of this yearbook called The Loop. I can bulk edit them by selecting them all and clicking edit. And then I'll scroll down to that yearbooks field and add them to the loop container. Save and then publish. All right, so that is how to set up and populate your containers. Okay, so we're going to do, before we move on to compilations, we're going to do another quick poll. All right, what is your primary use case for grouping items in your collections? Do you group items together because they're part of the same series or publication, by subject or theme, or by format? Or are you not grouping items together? I'll give you about 20 more seconds to respond. Okay. Looks like we have a mix of purposes for grouping items together, but the winner here is by subject or theme, which is very appropriate because next we're going to be talking about compilations. So let's move on and look at the slides for compilations. A compilation is a thematic sub-collection within a larger JSTOR collection. So in other words, compilations are often created to group content by subject matter within a published JSTOR collection. Compilations may contain compound objects, containers, and individual items. Each compilation has its own compilation page, which displays the compilation name, description, cover image, and institutional branding. A compilation page does not have fielded metadata like a container page does. And the screenshot here is a compilation called 3D Models, which is within the University of Wyoming's collection called VOR Buffalo Jump. And I'm going to show you the collection on JSTOR. Let me just drag it over. There it is. So this is the collection, and this collection contains 6 compilations, which you can see here. Each of these compilations has a subset of material from the collection, and the collection is documentation of the VOR Buffalo Jump site in Wyoming. And you can click on a compilation to see its content. So for example, if I click this compilation called Field Paperwork, I can see excavation forms and specimen logs and other related material like that from the site. Some of these compilations contain containers, such as the 3D models compilation. If I click on that one, this contains containers. So if I open the container called Bison, I can see those records that are relevant to that container. So compilations and containers are a way of creating a hierarchy within your collection as well, since you can nest a container within a compilation within your collection. So let's go back into JSTOR and stewardship, and I'll show you how to build a compilation. Okay. So as I said, compilations are used to group items together thematically on JSTOR. So I'm going to open up one of my own example projects here. I have a collection on JSTOR that I've published called Art and Architecture. And this contains sites of from a few different cities, some public art and some architectural works that I have in my collection. I'd like to group these photographs in sub-collections based on location for users to easily be able to browse the content by place. So we can go into stewardship to create some compilations. So let me go back into stewardship. And I'm going to open up my project called Art and Architecture right here. So creating a compilation is a little quicker than creating a container. There is something called a global compilation list in stewardship, and to create a new compilation, all you have to do is add a new compilation term to that list. The term that you create will be the name of your compilation. So to do that, you go to Cataloging Tools and then Manage Lists. And then you find the existing list here called JSTOR Compilation. There it is. So you're going to be adding a new term. So I'll just click the Add button at the top. And the name is the only required field for this term, but we also recommend adding a description because that description appears on the compilation page. So I'll add a new term for a few cities that are represented in my collection. So I'll create compilations called Chicago, Philadelphia, and Paris to start. And I'm just going to add a description to all of them. And I can use the same one for all for right now. I can always go back and edit these later if I like. So let me close this and I'll add a couple more. I'll do Milwaukee because I can't remember what I just added. So I'll add Milwaukee as one of my terms and save and close. Okay. So once you create the compilation, you save, and you can then add a cover image to your compilation page by uploading an image to the term record after saving your new term. So to do that, you'll be looking for the term that you just created. I think I just created Paris. and I can upload an image to be the image on my compilation page. So similarly to setting up the container page, I go to the media dropdown and upload a media file. And there we go. Okay, I'll just do that one for now. And I can always go back later and add more images to my other terms. Okay, so next we'll be adding the compilation field to my project. So I'm going to open up my project. It's the Art and Architecture project. And first I want to check whether the compilation field already exists in my project. This may be the case if you're using the JSTOR template because it's one of the default fields in your project. So go to Project Settings and then Fields, and then scroll down to look for the compilation field. It's likely at the bottom of your list of fields if you have it, if it's there, and it is there. There's a compilation field in my project because I did start with the JSTOR template in this case. If you don't have it, you can go here to Project Settings, to the Fields area and click Add Field, choose a list field, and then you'll name your field compilation, and then select the list called JSTOR compilation. I don't have to do that right now though, because I already have the field. And this is a good time to mention, if you are a tier 3 stewardship user using a SQLite compatible project, it is not possible currently to add fields or edit fields in your SQLite compatible projects. So you won't be able to use compilations and containers unless you use a project in stewardship that is not SQLite compatible. So just keep that in mind. If you're not able to do these options, you'll have to use compilations and containers in projects that are not using SQLite. Okay, so my compilation field is here within my project. And now I have to make sure that the compilation field is mapped so it will publish to JSTOR. So here within my project, I'm going to Project Settings where I already am, and then I'm going to choose Targets. I'll select my target and choose Map Projects Fields. The compilation field should map to the JSTOR compilations field. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to find that compilations field. And it is already mapped to the JSTOR compilations field. If it is not mapped, you can just click the link and choose the compilations field to make sure it publishes to JSTOR in a compilation. Okay, now to add content to my compilation, all I have to do is select the appropriate term in the compilation field in any of my records. So I'm going to open up some of my images in stewardship and choose the correct term. So let me just take a moment and find, I see an image from Paris here. So I'm going to go ahead and find the compilation field in my project, which is right here, and add the right term. And then, of course, you save and publish your records so they appear in the appropriate compilation. Okay, you can, of course, search within your project. If your records are cataloged already and you would like to search for relevant records, you can either search across all fields or use the filters at the top of the screen across your metadata fields to find content that matches your search terms. So I see many records here from Chicago. So I'm going to select all of that. I could just click select all at the top and click edit. And I'll add all of these to the Chicago compilation, which I believe I just created. Yep, there it is. All right, so I will save and publish these. Okay, so shortly after publishing, the compilation will appear on JSTOR. As you know, publishing sometimes takes a few minutes or an hour, so just check back later and it should be there. All right, so we're going to take a moment now to review these 3 content types and look at some additional examples just to make sure we are clear on what all of these are. So As you know, a compound object is a single record that contains multiple image files. This is an additional example of a compound object from Roger Williams University that is displaying both the front and back of a postcard. A container is a group of items that can be considered parts of a whole, often serialized content like periodicals, which may share bibliographic information. But you can also use containers if you'd like to add an additional hierarchical level to a compilation, since containers can be nested in compilations. So this is an example of a container from Allegheny College, called a Flemish Book of Hours that is part of Allegheny's Illuminated Manuscripts collection. And then a compilation is essentially a sub-collection of a larger collection, usually with thematically similar items. So here's an example of a compilation from a Hunter College collection, and I'll show you this on JSTOR so it's a little bit clearer. Here it is on JSTOR. So as you can see, if I go back to the Hunter College Archives collection, it has several thematic compilations, including this one. The Hunter College Bureau collection. And you can always see all of the items in the collection by just scrolling down and seeing the individual items beneath the compilations. All right, let's go back to our slides. And our final topic before we get to questions is Collection Builder. Collection Builder is a tool within stewardship that quickly creates and populates a new project with your existing spreadsheet of data. Collection Builder actually creates a project and imports the metadata at the same time. The tool walks you through uploading the data and creating the project fields using your existing metadata. You can then refine the field types and apply stewardship functionality like linked authorities to the fields. Once your project has been created, it's just like any other stewardship project, and you can edit the data you imported or add additional records as needed. So we are going to go back to stewardship now to try it out. Okay. Here we are. Okay. So here in stewardship, you can find Collection Builder from within the home page, not within a project. So we're going to use it to create a new project. Before we do, I'm curious to see if anyone has used Collection Builder before. So I'm doing one more very quick poll here. Have you ever created a project in stewardship using Collection Builder? I'll just give you a few seconds to answer. 5 more seconds. Okay, it looks like at least no one that has responded to the poll has used Collection Builder before. So that's interesting. I hope you get something out of this demonstration. All right, so let's go back. Here we are in stewardship. Now the poll is closed. Okay, so as I said, in Collection Builder, you find it from the home page, not within a project, because we're going to be creating a brand new project. So first, I want to actually show you the spreadsheet I'm going to be importing. Bear with me a second as I open it up. Sorry, I thought I had it ready. Okay. So this is the spreadsheet of example metadata that I'm going to be importing, and I can show you what it looks like. It's just a normal spreadsheet of data with fielded information and scattered cataloging. I have file names, of course, and then some varied cataloging across all of the records in the project. So I want to create a new project in stewardship using this metadata that I already have. Maybe I exported it from a different system, or maybe I've been cataloging in Excel for whatever reason. I can start out with that. So to use Collection Builder, you can just choose this button on the home screen of stewardship, import metadata with Collection Builder. And then you just find your spreadsheet. right here and click Next. Now, Collection Builder is creating fields based on the data in my spreadsheet. So I'll give it a second to do that. Okay, so here you can see all of the fields that the tool has created for my uploaded data. I can scroll down to see all of the fields that came from my spreadsheet, and it even shows where possible sample data that came from the data itself. So the relevant metadata from my spreadsheet. This is not a screen where I can edit the metadata. It is a place to review the fields that were created for the project. And if you'd like to change any of the field types at this point, you can. You just use the drop-down menu next to any of the field names if you want to make changes to any of them. You can also link authorities to any fields of the linked authority type that were created. So for example, I have a field here that I called author or artist in my spreadsheet. If I want to, and it's suggesting that that is a linked authority. So if I want to add an authority to that field, I know that shared shelf names contains Getty's union list of artist names. So I'm going to use that and choose add. If I wanted to rename that to something like contributor or creator, I can easily just type in that box and make that change as well. So when you're ready with making any edits to all of your fields, you can just scroll down to the bottom and click Next. And the project will be mapped to a new JSTOR collection for publishing. But of course, it will not be published yet until you actively publish the collection. So I'll give it a moment to set up my field mappings. Okay, it tells me it's just finishing up. Okay, there we go. Okay. Now I can name my collection. So I can set up the collection page, including naming the new collection, add a description for my collection, confirming the URL, and then selecting more information like whether I want this collection to be an open access collection, so publicly available on JSTOR, or available only for my own institution. So I will quickly name this collection. This is just an example, so I'm naming it my example collection so I can find it. I'm given this collection URL that I can, it will automatically create a URL as an extension of my institutional URL on JSTOR. And if I want to make changes to this, I can. I'll just leave it how it is for right now. And then the download size refers to the download that end users on JSTOR, the size that they can download the content of the collection. If I want to restrict downloads entirely, I can choose no downloads, and then users will not be able to download. That option won't be available. Okay, and I've made this available to only members of my own institution. So those are people coming into JSTOR within my institution's IP range or in their associated accounts, JSTOR accounts with my institution. And I will click Create Project. So once you create your project, your stewardship project and your JSTOR publishing target have been created, both at the same time. So this will now work like any other stewardship project. You can go ahead and upload the media files for these records. But note, of course, the file names and capitalizations have to match exactly. So to do that, if I'm going to add a media file, I'll just browse for my files, and I have a couple here ready to go. and upload them to the project, and then they'll be matched to the file names in the data that I've already uploaded. So there they are. And it sometimes takes a few minutes for the thumbnails to load in your project, but you can open up the record, see the image and any data that existed in that record that you just created with the collection loader. Okay. You can always check for errors with the file name. If the file name did not match exactly, it will create a new record in your project. And you can always just upload it again if you change the file name to ensure a match. That's very easy to do because this is now just like any other stewardship project. It was just created automatically based on the data that you already had. All right, so that takes us to our very last poll. I'm very interested in hearing your responses to this one. Which feature are you most likely to try after this session today? And you can, I think I set this up so you can select multiple if needed. I'll just give it 5 more seconds. Okay, looks like it's very close between all of the relational possibilities: compound objects, containers, compilations. Compilations getting the most votes. So very interesting. I'm sorry, there's one person here who doesn't have a use case for these. Totally understand. It might not be relevant to everyone's content. But thank you for participating. We just started using these polls in the session last month, and I think it's really fun to get a little feedback live from participants about what you're doing and what you're interested in hearing about. So I will close that, and we are going to go back to the slides now. And we have time for some questions. So Remus and I will both come back on camera to see if any questions have come in. And sorry, it's not letting me turn my camera yet. I'm trying.
No worries.
I'll be back on camera in a moment once I figure it out, but you can go ahead and let us know if there are any questions.
Yeah, there's a few. First up, we showed a couple of examples from Reveal Digital, and someone asked us to clarify what Reveal Digital is.
Oh, yeah. You know, I don't know if I have a great answer for this, but Reveal Digital is, let me go back to the Reveal Digital page, and that might help us. It's a grouping of collections from various libraries, museums, and so on it's a curated collection of content. If you go to the Reveal Digital page on JSTOR, you'll see a number of these collections, and each one of them contains many items. Often independent publishers or alternative presses are represented here. So it's a really great collection to check out. Mm-hmm. Do you have more information than that, Remus? Sorry, I'm a little distracted by my camera not working.
No worries. No, that's it. That's a good they're a team within JSTOR that curates these materials, and they're open access. Very, very cool. And they publish through stewardship, which is why they're a go-to example for us.
Yeah, they use a lot of containers and compilations, so they're always a great example.
Yeah. Someone else asked, how do I check to see if I have existing compound records?
One quick way of doing that is going within your project. Sorry, I'm looking for stewardship here. So if you go within a project that is using compound objects, I'm going to open up the example. Oops, not that one. My example project. There is a, let me see if I've closed it. Oh, here it is. There is a column called file count, and if it's all the way over here in my project. So if you have multiple files per any of your records, it will show here. So this is one kind of cheating way of quickly finding out if you have multiple or compound objects already in your project.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And then the last question that we currently have, we'll see if anyone else has more. Are there development plans to support multiple file types, e.g. an audio file, a PDF, transcript, etc., within the same compound object? Since right now compound objects are only image files.
I don't know if we have specific plans or a timeline for that, but I know it's something that we have been asked for, and is of interest to our users. I don't know, Remus, I don't know if you have more information than that.
No, that's the same. I would say, something you can consider in the interim is containers and compilations is another way to kind of group those, especially for instance with another use case for containers that we see a lot is, for instance, if you have oral histories, you can have a container that has the audio interview plus, or video interview, whichever, plus the transcript as a separate item, both published and then like grouped together with a container.
Mm-hmm.
SQLite question, is SQLite compatible with compound objects? Yes, it is. So same process, you can either group files at the point of upload, it'll still have that group by file name on the SQLite upload page, or as Elizabeth demonstrated, you can also add additional media files after the fact.
Great. And GoTo is not allowing me to share my camera
no.
for some reason, so I apologize, everyone.
No worries. All right. See if there's, I'll give folks a minute for any other questions before. And in the meantime, thank you, Elizabeth. This was super well.
Thank you. I'm so glad that so many people participated in the polls. That's always interesting information for us. And as I said, you'll get that survey that we always send out after this session. So thank you for any responses there are very helpful for us.
Yeah. And as a follow-up, the person who asked about grouping different files in a compound object mentioned that the oral history use case is one of their exact use cases. So I'm glad that we had that example handy.
Right.
I don't know, Elizabeth, we can maybe add, I don't know if you have an example of this in your handout, but maybe we can add an example of oral history containers.
Yeah, I will add an example. And as I mentioned in the handout, I'll just show it on my screen here. I put a section in for the examples that I shared today, and I can add additional examples here. Above this is an area for questions. These are questions from the first time we did this webinar. I'll just add to these from questions today with responses. So if you need to check in later about what we told you, that information will be here as well.
I'm not seeing any more questions, so perhaps we can give folks like 5 minutes back.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone. And we hope to see you next month at our next session. Bye.